Don't you ever touch me again, Alex. Emily hissed, her hands trembling with rage as the entire cafeteria fell silent. Her voice cut through the noise like a knife, halting everything around her. The students froze, their eyes shifting between her and the boy standing in front of her. Alex Hunter, the guy everyone at Clearview High School either feared or admired. The star quarterback, the golden boy, with the wealth and the confidence to match. He was always the center of attention, surrounded by his friends, basking in the power his status gave him. But today, Emily Parker, a new face in this school, wasn't going to let him have his way. Not today. Emily had seen bullies like Alex before. The ones who picked on people to make themselves feel powerful. But she wasn't like the others. She wasn't going to let him walk all over her, even if he was the king of the school. She stood her ground, her eyes locking with his, not flinching, not looking away. Her heart raced, but her voice remained steady, filled with a calm defiance. The cafeteria went quiet. The tension was thick, palpable. No one had ever dared to stand up to Alex like this. He smirked, his usual smug expression on his face, as if this was just another game to him. What's your problem? Alex sneered, clearly enjoying the attention. You think you can talk to me like that? You're just some new girl. Emily didn't back down. She wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. Maybe I'm just tired of people like you thinking you can bully everyone around, she said, her voice sharp. So, yeah, I'll talk to you like that. The room was still, no one daring to speak. Alex's friends shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do. Emily, on the other hand, felt a rush of empowerment. She wasn't going to let her past define her. She had learned long ago that strength didn't come from how loud you were, but from how firmly you stood in your own truth. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, but neither of them moved. Alex glared at Emily, his eyes narrowing. You're lucky I don't do something about this, he muttered, his voice low. Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. She simply turned on her heel and walked away, her steps firm, her head held high. The whispers started immediately. Did you see that? She talked back to Alex. No one talks to him like that. She's crazy. Emily didn't care. She had said her piece, and that was enough. As she walked through the halls of Clearview High, she felt the weight of the eyes on her back, but this time, it didn't matter. She had made her stand. And somehow, she knew this wasn't the last time Alex Hunter would be looking at her. This was only the beginning. The next day, Emily walked into school with a bit more confidence than she had the day before. She hadn't heard from Alex since the cafeteria incident, but the whispers were everywhere. People were talking about her. She could hear it in the halls, see it in the way students looked at her. Some were curious, others looked shocked, and a few were even impressed. But Emily didn't care. She had made her stand, and that was enough for her. She wasn't about to let the opinions of high school students dictate her life. Her focus remained on her studies, on making something of herself despite the challenges. Emily was used to being underestimated. She had moved from school to school, never staying in one place long enough to form lasting friendships. Always the outsider. But this school, Clearview High, was different. It felt like the beginning of something new, something that was hers to control. As she made her way to her locker, Emily heard someone call her name. She turned to see Alex walking toward her, his usual swagger present. But there was something different in his eyes. He wasn't mocking her this time. He wasn't surrounded by his friends. It was just him. Hey, Emily, he said, his tone softer than she had ever heard it. She raised an eyebrow, unsure of his intentions. What do you want? She asked, not backing down. Alex hesitated for a moment before speaking. Look, I know I've been a jerk, he said, his voice sincere. And I know I've treated you like crap. I don't know what happened, but I want to apologize. I should have never treated you the way I did. Emily studied him, trying to read his expression. This wasn't the Alex she knew, the arrogant, entitled jock who thought he could do whatever he wanted. She saw something else. In his eyes now, something that made her pause. She had never expected an apology from him, never thought he'd own up to his actions. She wasn't sure what to say. You've made things really hard for me, Emily finally replied, her voice steady but with a hint of emotion. But I appreciate you saying that. I didn't come here to fight anyone. I just want to be left alone and do my own thing. I don't need anyone's approval. Alex nodded, his gaze softening. I get it. I didn't think you'd want to talk to me after everything, but I really want to make it right, he said, taking a step closer. I'm not saying we have to be friends or anything, but I just want you to know I'm sorry. Emily took a deep breath, the weight of his apology settling in. She wasn't one to forgive easily, but something about his sincerity made her reconsider. I appreciate the apology, Alex. But you need to understand that things don't just get fixed with a few words, she said, her tone firm. It takes time. And actions. I don't expect you to change overnight. But if you really mean it, then show me. Alex nodded again, looking genuinely remorseful. I will. I promise. He smiled, just a little, before turning and walking away. Emily watched him go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had control over it. She wasn't going to let her past define her, and she wasn't going to let anyone dictate who she was or what she could achieve. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the next class, Emily gathered her things and walked toward her next destination, a sense of purpose and resolve in her steps. She had faced the bully, stood her ground, and now, it seemed, things were starting to change. Whether Alex would truly change, only time would tell. But Emily knew one thing for sure. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into Clearview High just a few days ago. It had been a week since Alex's apology, and Emily couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in the way people treated her. The whispers had died down, but there was still a lingering curiosity in the air. As she walked through the halls of Clearview High, she noticed more students nodding at her or smiling, though it wasn't the kind of smile that suggested mockery. It was different. There was a sense of respect in it. Emily couldn't help but wonder if Alex's apology had truly made a difference, or if it was just the shock of someone standing up to him that had shifted the dynamics at school. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was part of something. Not in the way that meant she was just accepted, but in the way that she had earned her place. And it felt good. It felt right. She had never thought about fitting in before, but now, something inside her had shifted. She had always been an outsider, someone who was always moving, always starting over. But now, this was her school, and for once, it felt like she was part of it. As she entered her third period class, she found her seat near the back, her usual spot. She didn't mind it. It was where she could observe without being noticed too much. Emily had always been the quiet observer, the one who noticed the small details, the ones that everyone else missed. It was how she survived in new environments, by reading the room before she made her move. But today, as she sat down, she felt a shift in the atmosphere. Alex walked into the room a few minutes late, as usual, but this time, his gaze met hers as he scanned the class. His eyes lingered for just a moment longer than necessary, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. She quickly turned her attention back to the front of the room, pretending not to notice. But she did. She noticed how he walked up to the teacher and made a quiet request to sit near her. She felt a flutter of nerves, but she didn't know why. She had already told herself she wasn't going to think too much about Alex, not anymore. But now, here he was, making a move she didn't expect. He took the seat next to hers and immediately opened his notebook, scribbling something down. Emily couldn't help but glance over, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Hey," he said quietly, not looking at her. Emily glanced at him, unsure of what to say. "Hey," she replied, her voice soft. She wasn't sure where this was going, but she wasn't ready to back down from it either. Alex shifted in his seat, finally turning his gaze to meet hers. "I just wanted to say thanks," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "For giving me a chance. For not holding everything against me. I know I've done a lot of messed up things in the past, but I'm trying to be better." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't the arrogant jock she had once known. This was someone else, someone trying to change. And for the first time, she wondered if he might actually be serious. "You don't have to thank me," she said, shaking her head. "I just did what I had to do. But if you're really trying to change, then that's your choice." Alex nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I am. I want to. And I need to know that you see that. I know I messed up, but I can't fix everything in one day. I just want to show you that I'm not the same person I was before." Emily swallowed hard. She didn't know how to respond. It felt like too much too soon. But at the same time, it was hard to ignore the sincerity in his eyes. She had never expected this from Alex, not in a million years. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, and Alex stood up, grabbing his bag. Before he left, he turned to Emily once more. I'll see you around, he said, his tone softer than before. Emily didn't know what to make of it all, but one thing was clear, things were changing. Maybe it wasn't just the school that was shifting. Maybe, just maybe, she was too. The following week, things had settled into a strange sort of rhythm for Emily. School had become bearable, even enjoyable at times. She wasn't quite sure if it was the change in the atmosphere or the fact that she had finally found her place, but every day felt like a new opportunity. Alex hadn't bothered her since that conversation in class, and she found herself almost appreciating the space. There were days when she caught herself thinking about him, wondering if his apology was genuine or if he was just trying to smooth things over. But then she remembered how his eyes had looked when he spoke to her that day, how soft and sincere his voice had been. He seemed different, but Emily wasn't in the business of waiting for people to change. She had her own future to build. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even Alex, distract her from what she had set out to accomplish. As the days passed, she started to notice small things, how the other students didn't look at her with judgment anymore, how some even started to approach her with respect. It felt like a shift had occurred, not just in the school's dynamics, but in her as well. Emily had always been the new girl, the one who moved from place to place, trying to fit in, trying to find her footing. But now, she wasn't just trying to blend in. She was carving out her space, and the more she did, the more confident she became in who she was. One afternoon, as Emily was heading to her locker after history class, she saw Alex waiting by the door, his backpack slung over his shoulder. His eyes locked onto hers the moment she stepped into the hallway. "Hey, Emily," he called out, his tone casual, but there was an edge of hesitation there. Emily wasn't sure how to feel. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon, and she definitely hadn't expected him to approach her after everything that had happened. She slowed her pace, giving him a cautious look. "What's up?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Alex shifted on his feet, clearly unsure of what to say. "I just wanted to check in with you. I know I've been distant, but I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, and I just wanted to make sure I didn't mess things up between us," he said, looking at her earnestly. Emily was taken aback by his words. She hadn't expected him to care this much, and she definitely hadn't expected him to be so open about it. But there was something in his eyes now, something that made her pause. He wasn't the same person he had been when they first met. "I appreciate that you're saying this, Alex. Honestly, I didn't think I'd hear from you again," Emily said, her tone softening just slightly. "But I'm not the same person I was when I got here either. I've got my own things to focus on, and I can't just keep looking back." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I get it," he said quietly. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be a better person, and I hope you can see that." Emily met his gaze, the sincerity in his voice impossible to ignore. For a moment, she found herself considering the possibility that Alex really was trying to change. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll take your word for it," she said, her voice steady. Alex smiled slightly, and for the first time, it wasn't smug or arrogant. It was genuine, almost nervous. "Thanks, Emily. I guess I'll see you around." "Yeah, see you around," she replied, watching as he turned and walked down the hall. As Emily stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd, she felt a shift inside her. Maybe it wasn't about whether or not Alex had changed. Maybe it was about her own growth. She wasn't the same girl who had walked into Clearview High a month ago. She had found her voice, found her strength, and it felt like the world was opening up to her in ways she hadn't expected. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what the future might hold. The days that followed felt like a blur to Emily. She was getting used to the subtle changes in the air around her. The whispers had died down, and although she still caught the occasional curious glance, she no longer felt like an outsider. There was something comforting about the new sense of normalcy, something that reminded her that she was making progress. She had always been the new girl, always the one to keep her head down, moving from place to place, but here, at Clearview High, things were different. Her sense of self had shifted in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about thriving. Emily had made peace with her place in the school, but there was still one thing that lingered in the back of her mind: Alex. Over the past week, he had made an effort to be respectful and kind, but there were moments, like today, when she couldn't help but wonder if there was something more behind his actions. As she walked down the hallway, she saw him again. He was standing by his locker, talking to a few of his friends. He looked up when he saw her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. Emily wasn't sure what it was, but there was a shift in the air between them, something unspoken but heavy. She kept walking, trying to ignore the way her heart skipped a beat. But then, to her surprise, Alex pushed through the crowd of students and jogged up to her. "Hey, Emily," he called, his voice carrying over the noise of the hallway. She stopped, turning to face him. "Hey," she said, unsure of what to expect. Alex gave her a small smile. His usual cocky demeanor softened. "I was wondering if you'd want to grab some lunch today? Just the two of us. No crowds, no distractions," he asked, his eyes earnest. Emily hesitated for a moment. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to reach out like this, to suggest they spend time together outside of school. But she remembered the way he had apologized and the sincerity she had seen in his eyes. Maybe this was just a step toward being friends. Maybe this was his way of showing that he meant what he said. "Sure," she replied, her voice steady. "Sounds good." They walked together to a small cafe a few blocks away from school. The conversation was easy at first. They talked about their classes, about life outside of school, about things that weren't about status or popularity. For the first time, Emily saw Alex as more than just the arrogant jock. She saw the person behind the title, the person who was trying, for once, to be something more than what everyone expected him to be. As they sat down at a small table, Alex looked across at her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice quiet. "I know I've messed up a lot, and I'm not proud of the way I treated you, or anyone really. But I'm trying to be better. I want to be better, not just for me, but for the people around me. And if I'm being honest, I don't want to keep pretending that everything's fine." Emily looked at him, her thoughts swirling. She hadn't expected him to open up like this, hadn't expected him to let his guard down. "I get it," she said, her voice soft but understanding. "We all have things we need to work on." Alex nodded, looking down at his hands for a moment. "Yeah, but sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in this role that everyone expects me to play. Like I'm trapped in this box that's so hard to break out of," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his words. Emily reached across the table, placing a hand on his. It was a simple gesture, but it felt meaningful. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself," she said, her words sincere. "You're more than just a stereotype, Alex. You can be whoever you want to be." He looked up at her, a smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Emily. I don't know if I've ever really heard that before." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation hanging in the air. There was something unspoken between them, something that neither of them was ready to define. But Emily knew one thing for sure. Things were changing. Maybe it wasn't just Alex who was changing. Maybe it was her, too. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, and they both stood up, collecting their things. As they walked back to school, side by side, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of possibility in the air. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the verge of something new, something that was entirely her own. The next few weeks passed in a quiet, almost peaceful way. Emily was getting used to the rhythm of her life at Clearview High. She was no longer the new girl who had to fight to be seen. She was just Emily now. She had found her place, not by blending in, but by standing out and staying true to herself. Alex had become a part of that, not in the way she had originally expected, but in a way that made her realize how much people could change when they truly wanted to. They didn't hang out together every day, but when they did, it felt natural. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other without the baggage of past mistakes. One afternoon, Emily was walking to her locker after her last class when she saw Alex waiting for her by the door. He had a smile on his face, but it wasn't the cocky, arrogant smile that used to drive her crazy. It was warm, genuine. "Hey, Emily," he called out. She smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Hey, Alex. What's up?" "Nothing much," he said, glancing around. "I was wondering if you wanted to come hang out with me and a few friends after school. It's not anything big, just a group of us going to get some coffee." Emily hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure if she was ready to be part of a group, especially a group that included Alex's friends. But then again, she wasn't the same person she had been when she first arrived at Clearview. She had grown, learned to trust herself and the choices she made. "Sure, that sounds good," she replied, surprising herself with how easily the words came out. Alex's face lit up, and for a moment, it was as if the past few weeks had never happened. He wasn't the high school jock, and she wasn't the quiet outsider. They were just two people, standing in the hallway, sharing a moment. As they walked out of the school together, Emily noticed how much had changed. The air was different now, lighter somehow. She wasn't worried about what people thought of her. She wasn't concerned about fitting in. For the first time, she was simply enjoying the moment, enjoying the feeling of being accepted for who she was. At the coffee shop, Emily found herself chatting easily with Alex's friends. They were all nice, welcoming, and surprisingly down to earth. She had expected them to be just like the other popular kids she had encountered in the past, but they were different. They weren't trying to impress anyone. They were just being themselves. As the afternoon went on, Emily realized that she wasn't just learning about Alex's friends. She was learning more about herself, too. She was beginning to understand that the world wasn't as small as she had always thought it was. There were so many people, so many experiences, and it was up to her to decide how to engage with them. It wasn't about fitting in. It was about finding people who respected her for who she was and embracing those connections. As they left the coffee shop, Alex turned to Emily, his expression thoughtful. "I'm really glad you came today," he said quietly. "I know we haven't been friends for long, but I think we're getting there." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in his words. "Yeah, I think we are." It wasn't a big declaration, but it felt significant. It felt like a new beginning, not just for their friendship, but for everything Emily had been through. She was no longer the girl who had been afraid to step into the light. She was the girl who had learned to stand tall in it. And for the first time, she was excited about the future, knowing that it was hers to shape. The weeks that followed felt like a slow but steady transformation for Emily. She wasn't just adjusting to Clearview High anymore. She was thriving. The sense of belonging she had once hoped for was now a reality. It wasn't about being the most popular or trying to fit into a mold. It was about finding people who respected her and accepted her for who she was. And she had found that, not just in her classmates, but in herself. Alex had remained a constant part of that change. Their friendship, which had started with awkward steps and hesitations, had grown into something genuine. They no longer needed to pretend, and the weight of their past encounters was gradually lifting. One afternoon, as they sat in the cafeteria, Alex leaned over, his voice a little quieter than usual. "I've been thinking," he started, glancing around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. Emily raised an eyebrow, sensing a change in his tone. "About what?" she asked, curious. "About us," he said, his gaze flickering with uncertainty. "I know we've been friends for a while now, but I wanted to ask if you thought there was more to it. Between us, I mean." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. Sure, they had grown close, but she hadn't considered the possibility of something more. They had become so comfortable in their friendship that it never crossed her mind. But now, with the question hanging in the air, she felt a strange mix of emotions. She wasn't sure what to say. She liked Alex, liked him more than she had admitted to herself, but she wasn't sure if it was the right time to explore what that meant. "I don't know," she replied slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I've never really thought about it. We've been through a lot, and I'm still figuring things out." Alex nodded, as if he had expected this response, but his expression was still hopeful. "I get it," he said. "I just didn't want to leave things unsaid, you know? I like spending time with you, and I think I'm ready for whatever comes next." Emily sat back, processing his words. She wasn't used to opening up about her feelings, especially when it came to relationships. She had always kept her distance, afraid of being hurt, afraid of getting too close to people who might let her down. But Alex wasn't like the others. He had shown her that people could change, that they could learn, and that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him with her heart. "I don't know what the future holds," Emily said finally, her voice soft but steady. "But I think I'd like to find out with you, if you're still up for that." Alex's face lit up, his smile reaching his eyes. "I'm more than up for that," he said, his tone filled with relief. "I'll wait, Emily. Whatever it takes." In that moment, everything felt right. It wasn't about rushing into something or forcing an outcome. It was about being present, about growing together. Emily felt the weight of her past slip away as she realized that she had finally found someone she could trust, someone who cared about her for who she was, flaws and all. As they left the cafeteria together, Emily couldn't help but smile. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face it. With Alex by her side, she wasn't afraid anymore. The weeks that followed were filled with an unfamiliar sense of peace for Emily. Life at Clearview High had become less of a battle and more of a journey, one that she was starting to enjoy more than she had expected. With Alex by her side, things seemed different. Not in the way that everything had magically fallen into place, but in a way that made her realize how much she had grown. They weren't rushing into anything, but there was a quiet understanding between them, a shared connection that had been built over time. One Friday afternoon, as they sat on the bleachers watching the football game, Emily found herself smiling. It wasn't the typical excitement that came with watching a game, but something else. She had never really cared about sports, but being here, surrounded by people she now considered friends, made her realize how much she had been missing out on. Alex, sitting beside her, had his usual easygoing demeanor, but his eyes kept drifting to her, as if making sure she was enjoying herself. Emily appreciated that. It was the little things, the small gestures that showed he truly cared. "You okay?" Alex asked, his voice soft as the game continued in the background. Emily nodded, feeling a sense of calm settle over her. "Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking about how much has changed." Alex grinned, his eyes lighting up. "Yeah, it's crazy how things work out. I mean, we went from you being the new girl who couldn't stand being here, to you actually showing up to the games with me. You're a true Clearview High student now." Emily laughed, shaking her head. "I wouldn't go that far. But yeah, I'm starting to feel like I belong here." As the game progressed, Emily found herself leaning back against the bleacher, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face and the hum of the crowd around her. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She wasn't the girl who had to keep to herself, afraid of being judged. She had found her place, and it wasn't because of Alex or anyone else. It was because she had learned to accept herself, to trust that she deserved the happiness she had now. When the game ended, Alex turned to her with a grin. "So what do you think? Want to grab something to eat?" Emily smiled, the simplicity of the moment filling her with contentment. "I'd like that," she replied, standing up. As they walked off the field together, their laughter mixing with the noise of the crowd, Emily couldn't help but feel like everything was finally falling into place. She had once been afraid of letting people in, afraid that they wouldn't accept her, that they wouldn't see the real her. But now, she knew that the only person she needed to accept her was herself. The future no longer felt like something to fear. It felt like something to embrace. And as she walked next to Alex, she felt ready for whatever was coming next. Whatever that might be, she knew she was no longer alone. It was the end of the semester, and Emily couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since she first walked through the doors of Clearview High. It felt like a lifetime ago, yet it had only been a few months. The girl who had once been scared, unsure of where she fit, was now someone who had not only found her place, but had also made an impact. She walked through the hallways with her head held high, the sense of confidence that had eluded her before now settled firmly within her. Her friends had become her family, and her relationship with Alex had grown into something real. They weren't rushing anything. There was no need to. Everything felt like it was falling into place naturally. That afternoon, as the final bell rang, Emily gathered her things and made her way out of the school, where she was supposed to meet Alex. They had plans to go to the park, a quiet space where they could talk and just be themselves. As she walked through the parking lot, she spotted Alex leaning against his car, waiting for her with a smile on his face. His presence still made her heart flutter, even after everything they had been through. "Hey," she greeted him, walking over and giving him a small smile in return. "Hey, you." He opened the door for her, and they both climbed into the car. As they drove toward the park, the comfortable silence between them spoke volumes. Emily had never been one for small talk, but with Alex, she didn't need to say anything. They understood each other, and that was enough. When they arrived, they walked to their usual spot under a large oak tree, the one where they had spent countless afternoons talking about everything and nothing. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm glow over the park. Emily sat down on the grass, and Alex joined her. "I've been thinking," Alex started, breaking the silence, "about how lucky we are, you know? I never thought I'd be here, sitting with you, in this kind of space. I was so caught up in everything before, and I didn't realize how much I was missing." Emily looked at him, her heart swelling. She had always been the one to think about the future, the one who wanted to know what was next. But now, sitting here with him, she felt no rush. There was no pressure, no expectations. It was just them, in the moment. I know what you mean, she replied softly. I spent so much time trying to fit in, trying to make people accept me. I never realized I just had to accept myself first. Alex reached over and took her hand in his. The gesture simple, but meaningful. You've come a long way, Emily, he said, his voice filled with pride. And I'm proud of you. You've made this place yours, and you've made me see things differently. Emily smiled, squeezing his hand. I didn't do it alone, Alex. You've been a part of this, too. You've shown me what it's like to be open, to let people in. And that's something I'll always be grateful for. They sat there in silence for a while, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange as the day came to an end. Emily wasn't sure what the future held, but she didn't feel afraid of it anymore. She had learned that it wasn't about having all the answers or knowing what was next. It was about taking each moment as it came and finding peace in the process. With Alex by her side, she felt ready for whatever the future might bring. It wasn't about rushing or trying to control everything. It was about enjoying the journey and knowing that, together, they could face anything that came their way.